Hello and welcome to Book Lust. I'm Nancy Pearl. My guest today at Folio in downtown Seattle is Kel McDonald, a comic artist and editor. Kel, thank you for joining us. I know you're
Happy to be here.
I know you're in Portland, so you're probably getting the same terrible weather there, rain-wise, that we are here, but
Yep.
we're used to it, I'm sure. So your new book, the new book that you edited, is Failure to Launch, a tour of ill-fated futures. First of all, what drew me to the book was the title and the subtitle.
Yeah.
Did you have trouble coming? Let's talk about the genesis of this book, and because I found it just fascinating and fun.
So the way, I'm the managing editor at Iron Circus, and the way we usually pick our topics for our anthologies is Spike, the owner and founder of Iron Circus, will say like kind of a general thing that she wants to do, and then we'll like refine that's broader, and then we'll refine it and go back and forth as like, is this too niche or is this one too uh broad? Because we really like to try to find that nice spot where the stories aren't going to be too repetitive, but it's also easy to sell to a person.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Spike really likes weird history. And I like to hear stories about it depends on the history story, but I also like to dabble in it a little bit. And I especially like history about stuff that didn't go anywhere, or that like, because people always talk about the success stories. And One of the things, like while we were refining it, is there's a YouTuber I really like, H Bomber Guy, who he is in Failure to Launch. He wrote a story, and while talking about how broad we wanted to be, he has an older video that he put up that is about the guy who did the programming for a video game called Dragon's Lair, um, and how that guy basically went bankrupt after that one big success. And so if we have like some modern examples, um, the thing about that guy's story in particular is a lot of the stuff he wanted to do, our iPhone or Alexa can do now. He just wanted it to happen in the 80s, so the tech wasn't quite there. And So you have stuff that's like completely ridiculous. Um, like there's the baby birthing machine that's mentioned, trying to use centrifugal force to help women in childbirth, and that is like all bad ideas all the way down. But then you have also ideas like um this thing would be cool, but we just haven't quite gotten there yet to make it viable. Um, and so using those as sort of the two benchmarks was kind of our setting.
The ridiculous to the sublime, basically. Did you then reach out to different comic artists or writers that you?
Usually, we invite about 10 people, and then we have open submissions. So like I mentioned the YouTuber H Bomber Guy. We invited him. He was one of the invites. And then we also invited Ryan North, who has won several Eisners and written some bestsellers. And I actually drew his story in the Failure to Launch book. And then we use like those sort of bigger names to be like, you could be in a book with so and so, to get people to submit their pitch ideas. And then we go through them, and with this one, we made sure that they were things that actually happened. We had a few people that accidentally submitted sci-fi pitches in general, rather than like um, just ideas that never got off the ground, nonfiction.
Right.
And we have like a process that we go through to pick people.
Do you? so when those people who submitted science fictiony stuff, do you like save those for the next for another anthology that if
Oh, because we don't always know what the next anthology is going to be. So like I'm in the middle of editing the next anthology, and it's called Perfect Crime Party. And that one's like comedic crime stories, like tonally like the movie Clue.
uh-huh.
So those sci-fi pitches, like they're not relevant to the next anthology, and stuff that got rejected from Perfect Crime Party will probably not be relevant to the next one after that. So, if they are people that are really good, we do like maybe we want to reach out to them for a future anthology, but we don't necessarily like keep
You
the
don't
story on
say
lock.
right. Okay. And how did you get into all of this? Like,
Uh,
did you begin? Were you a reader as a kid, or did you?
oh,
You
I actually I'm very dyslexic, so I hated reading as a kid.
Hear that a lot,
And
actually.
uh until I discovered audiobooks, I didn't really like consume a lot of prose.
Uh-huh.
And then I started to read comics after I tried making them. So in 2005, I ran a web comic for 12, starting in 2005, I ran a web comic that ran for 12 years. Um, and while that did take a lot of time, I didn't want to like put all my career eggs in one basket with this one title. So I started an anthology comic series called Cautionary Fables and Fairy Tales, which Iron Circus also puts out. But I was originally self-publishing it, and sort of the fourth volume into that, Iron Circus picked up the series, reprinted the old ones that were falling out of print. And then I started to edit other anthologies for Iron Circus since I had proven that I can run an anthology on my own
Hmm.
successfully.
And would when you were go back to when you were a child and did you draw all the time? I mean, was
Yeah,
that
all the
your
time.
yeah?
All the time. Apps. Yeah. Got yelled at by teachers for drawing in class.
And so but the comics at that time, like when I think about the comics when I was a kid, it was like Little Lulu and things. Have you ever heard of Little Lulu?
Heard a little Lulu. So the thing is I also I majored in comic books in college. So
Yeah.
even the comics that I was not familiar with as a kid, I got a history lesson of comics.
Uh-huh.
Ha,
So it was a major at Savannah College of Art and Design.
uh-huh. And then wow, could you choose your own like major there in the sense of what you were going to specialize in? I mean, were there like artists of all kinds at that
So Savannah College of Art and Design was they have like preset majors that you pick, and so I say I majored in comics, but technically my degree says sequential art. So that's comics, but it's also like how to storyboard for movies.
Uh-huh.
So some of the folks in the sequential art department ended up getting jobs storyboarding commercials. And so it was more about using images in sequence to tell a story clearly. But there are also animation majors, illustration majors, fashion majors, architecture
Mhm.
majors, like graphic design.
but
So
you knew that you really wanted to be a you
yeah.
wanted to do comics.
Yes.
And do you ever think about how um, fortunate in many ways it is that you're living now because of the intersection of comics and technology? Like your web comic you couldn't have done in the
Yeah, I
1980s.
think I started a webcomic at just the right time,
Uh-huh.
because right now, due to social media being in a big flux, um, but people have been a lot of there are some people out there who think the internet is Facebook or the internet is Twitter. And it's been that way for like over a decade. So you have a bunch of newer artists now who are so used to using social media to promote their stuff that they don't have their own website.
Mm.
Um, so as Twitter falls apart, and um, Facebook has gotten their algorithm is weird, and um, Instagram won't put stuff in order. Like, so you have all basically they're at the whims of the algorithm. Whereas when I started my comic, it was a few years before those became a big force. So I do have my own website. And I also ads on websites used to pay better before the pivot to video movement.
Mhm.
So I actually made a decent amount of money off of my webcomic when I was starting out compared to other people who were starting out in comics. Um, but now ads don't really pay that well on your own website because Facebook and Google's algorithm stuff has sort of dampened them down a bunch, or there's priority for video. And also, um, so that sort of kickstarted things for me. And then I was there when Kickstarter first started. When I was ready to have a book made, Kickstarter was there, or like, I think I was the third comic project on Kickstarter.
Oh, wow.
Um, and so, I was good enough at it that even while in college, one of my professors asked me to do like a presentation on how to start a webcomic. And recently I was asked back to SCAD to give a similar presentation. And now instead of being like, these are the things I use to get the word out about my comic, I'm like, these are things I use that don't exist anymore. Like, here's a slideshow of internet companies that came and went in the time that I was making my webcomic. Um, so the lesson is diversify and make sure that you have your own website, because they could any other website you don't control could get sold to an
Mhm.
idiot and fall apart.
Do you find that you have a kind of advantage in the sense that you write and draw your own, all that material is yours? It's not that you've
Yeah,
talk about that. Talk
definitely.
about,
Yeah.
what that would be like, or what you understand from other people. Like some of the in failure to launch, so in I don't know how many of the histories that are in there are written and drawn by different people, but there are,
Yeah.
and what is that? What would I can't imagine. I know children's picture books are, the artist and the illustrator and the writer frequently, most often, are not the same
I
person.
think that doing both helps me as an editor because one thing is that a lot of editors, especially now, if they're transferring to prose into graphic novels and comics, they don't have the vocabulary to articulate what's maybe not working in art. So talking to other artists, they have shared with me frustrations that they get notes to change stuff when the drawing is almost done. So they have to redo everything.
Mhm.
And I had an artist that I worked for compliment me on the fact that I only asked for big story changes in the script stage because I understood like how long it takes to draw a drawing. It's easy, it takes much less time to write they walk down the street than it takes to draw people walking down a street.
Right.
Um, and so if there is like a plot hole or like a theme isn't resonating, I try to catch that in the script stage. And with big art changes, I try to do it in the pencil rougher stage. Um, and try to save my notes for the stage that we're focusing on, so that way there's minimal revisions when the book is close to done.
Mm-hmm.
So like for if someone's sending me colors, I will only give notes on the colors. And also doing both, I think, helps me recognize you have stuff like I mentioned, H Bomber Guy. This was his first comic. And since he's used to writing video essays on YouTube, he can just talk forever. Um, and obviously he can like clean up the script, but he doesn't worry about how the physical space that the text takes up. So there was some back and forth with him with like this page has too much text on it, so you need to break it into 2 pages.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. And I feel like I frequently, if I have someone who's writing their first comic, that is a frequent note that I end up giving. Is just think about how much space the text is taking up.
So when somebody sends you a manuscript for one of these, did people send in what they saw as the finished product, in the sense that they sent you, you know, the text and the pictures?
So it will say like panel 1, they're walking down a street.
Oh.
Panel 2, this character says this. Panel 2, close up on this character. So it's closer to a movie script.
Uh-huh.
And not everyone likes to submit scripts like that. One of the benefits for someone who is both an artist and a writer is I tell them they can send me like a very rough layout, like I kind of stick figure theater, and just
Mm-hmm.
put the dialogue in so I can at least see how much dialogue is going on the page.
I I thought that one of the great one of the best things about failure to launch is that for somebody who isn't really deep into the world of comics and, you know, graphic stuff, it just is an introduction to so many different comic artists. And what you see, you know, just sort of paging through the book, is the variety of illustrations. I mean, I thought that was just like amazing. And, you know, I started making lists of artists and writers that I wanted to check out more, which I'm sure was one
And
of the
that's kind
goals.
of deal with these anthologies is making sure that we have that large variety. And part of why we take submissions is um their submission might be the first time we hear about them.
Uh-huh.
So it also
Right.
helps us know who we might want to invite to pitch a full book to us, rather than just a short story in one of our anthologies.
Right. Yeah. Did do you have a how do you feel about, you know, talking about this? I mean, we always talk about graphic novels, and so many of what's come out are not novels. You know, they're graphic, and, you know, there's been this sort of trying to figure out what to call them, and indeed where to keep them.
So,
Yeah, go ahead.
so I feel like when I talk to other comic creators, there's a mix of do they like the term graphic novel or not? And I do like graphic novel, but I would like it if graphic became like the adjective, rather than graphic novel being the catch-all. So like graphic memoir, graphic novella, graphic short stories.
Right.
Um, I'm not particularly fond of the word comic because it implies comedic.
Mm-hmm.
And while there are some jokes in my comics, they're not usually that funny. I prefer graphic novel just because I think comic implies humor.
Uh-huh. Right.
But I
And
would like
also,
people to start saying graphic memoir, graphic novella, graphic nonfiction,
right.
something like that.
Why do you think that there are so many graphic memoirs? And why do you think that that's a particularly um, a genre of writing that is particularly suited to these
They're
to the
easier
graphic
to
part?
promote
They're easier to promote. Okay, talk about that.
About that.
because the creator talking about their life is also the plot of the book. So you don't have to ask creators about their life and the story. You just have to ask them about their life. So it makes
Yeah.
so it's like the creator is also the walking advertisement for the book. So it makes advertising it easier.
Do you include autobiographical stuff in the
Yeah.
comics that you do?
I don't like to do autobio stuff. I like to write about werewolves and vampires.
But do you like, I know, talking to fiction writers, for example, they'll, while they're not, well, my own example, my own experience writing fiction is that, you borrow a little bit of this from somebody and a little bit of that and a little bit of yourself and, mix it all together in a blender and out comes something new. Not a werewolf or a
Yeah.
vampire, but
Yeah.
I do think like every author puts a little bit of themselves into everything that's their fiction. It's just I try to because I really like vampires and werewolves, I'm also thinking about the genre as a whole more than
Uh-huh.
my life in general.
Yeah.
And I always try to when editing try to help someone like refine the story they want to tell rather than push them to what's easier to sell or
Mm.
what reflects who they are more.
so you write and illustrate. I mean, like your web comic and your, the stuff that you do. You're creating something that you, as a reader, viewer, would want to read and view. I'm
Yes.
basically. I mean, to me, that's always the best. I mean, I always think that's the only way to go is to write something for yourself.
Because I feel like people can tell if you're not passionate about the subject.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you have a favorite? Like my favorite vampire novel is Sunshine. Did you ever?
I have read Sunshine. Trying to think.
Wouldn't that be a good graphic novel? You could put in the
Yeah.
recipe for cinnamon rolls that you just really want.
Then so I really like Sean and McGuire's work. And she wrote a story about how werewolves aren't allowed in Australia because they're an invasive species.
And was that illustrated or?
Yeah. No, that was prose. So I have the audiobook of that. And then as far as comics, I really like Artie and the Wolf Moon by Olivia Stevens. And she just put out another werewolf comic called Darling and Her Other Names. Darling and Her Other Names is about black werewolves in the 1800s fighting against white supremacy and colonialism. So it's using the overhunting of wolves um as like a connection slash metaphor to the oppression of black people. And it's really, really good.
Sounds great. Sounds really good.
And she's self-publishing that on her Patreon, a chapter at a time. So I highly recommend people go check that out.
And do you think that Patreon is the way to go, where you pay for the web content from individual creators? or podcasters, whatever?
So the thing is I always put my stuff up for free, because that makes it easier for people to find. And then I have my Patreon is you get to read it early.
Uh-huh.
Because I think the dangers of Patreon for a creator is if you're making too much extra stuff just for Patreon, you can burn out that way. So I think it's more of a do what works. So like keeping Darling behind a paywall is working for Olivia. Um, but for me, I have too much to do, so I can't make stuff exclusive for Patreon. I just give it to people early.
Uh-huh. Okay, but this is my last question. um, with failure to launch, one of the things that I always enjoy reading in anthologies is who the various contributors are and what their background is. And this is a particularly diverse group. Would you agree?
And that's intentional.
Yeah, and that's essential. So, is the comic industry, as you see it, a very diverse world, or does it need to have more diversity?
It needs to have more diversity in the official publishing sphere. I feel like if you get into self-publishing, it is super diverse. It's just people like publishers aren't funding as many diverse people as they should be.
Yeah.
Well, on that maybe down note, let me say thank you, Kel, so much for being on the show today, and good luck with failure to launch. And I'm looking forward to seeing more of your work and going back and reading the fairy tale anthologies.
Yeah, the fairy tale anthologies are kid friendly, so if anyone wants to get some comic anthologies for their kid, each volume is folklore from a different continent. And we just finished the series, so we've covered all the continents now.
I love it. I love it. All right, thank you so much, Kel.
And people can read my free comics at kelmcdonald.com.
Yes. Oh, kelmcdonald.com. McDonald. No A.
Yes.
Bye-bye.